Hello, thank you for joining me. Today I'm going to introduce you to FloodAware, Riverside's mobile application for flood awareness. Once you get the application installed from the marketplace, you launch it by tapping the icon. You'll see our splash screen come up and then transition into our main application. A quick tour of the interface at the top here. We have an indicator of your current location, and based on your current location we get a reading from a nearby gauge that'll tell us what the flood conditions are. And currently in Fort Collins there's no flooding. Next we have an icon that'll take you to a hydrograph, and that is basically just a plot of the data that's coming off of the gauge. We have an icon that'll take you to an interactive map that allows you to pan about and look at all the conditions being reported by all the different gauges across the United States. There's about 5,000 gauges that are being monitored, and that we have access to that data. And here we have an icon that basically gives you more information about this application and gives you a link to our website. Alright, let's get started. First of all, I'm going to show you our configuration screen. If you hit the menu button and go into configuration, you can see all your options here and what the default settings are. Currently we're using our current location, no GPS location, so that means we're using cell tower triangulation. We have a background service that'll continue to run even after you've shut the app down or gone on to work on other things. And it will continue to monitor your location, or whatever selected location you have, against the local gauges and tell you if there's a flood condition. And this option here tells us to use the forecasted data rather than observed data. So currently we're using observed data, so we're actually seeing what's being reported at the present time. And for the background service we have a polling frequency. We can set that anywhere from 12 hours to 30 minutes. We have it set at 30 minutes, and I'm going to leave it there. As an alternative to using the current location as determined by cell triangulation or the GPS, you can actually set your location on the map. And that gives you the option to set a separate location. Say if you're traveling and you want to keep tabs on the conditions back at home or some other location, you can set your marker for that location and it will sit there and monitor just that location. Okay, back here, the main screen, really briefly we'll go into the hydrograph, take a look at the data that's being reported here in Fort Collins, and you can see we have no flooding, pretty normal stage on the gauge, and also we have no forecasted data. If we pop into the interactive map, we should come up centered on our current location, and we'll load all the gauges that are being monitored by the National Weather Service. Okay, so here we have a map of all of the gauges in the area that are reporting. You'll see some of these are grayed out. The light gray means that we have old data. No data reported within the last 24 hours. The dark gray is out of service, so those actually aren't reporting any data. Yellow is near flood stage, and as we zoom out a little bit and pan around, we'll find some other statuses that we can look at. Up here, purple is major flooding, so that's kind of interesting. And we go over here in this area and we'll see that orange is minor flooding, so there's some minor flooding in this area. And what else do we have? I know where there's some flooding. Let's zoom over here to the west coast, and if you look here, there's some recent storm activity. Once we get close enough, you can see there's some moderate flooding here. So if I wanted to get an alert, come on, I put my indicator there, and the application is going to give me a warning saying there's some flood activity in that area. So if we drop down our system tray here and look at the alert, it'll take us right into the hydrograph for that gauge that's reporting. And as you can see, we're in this orange area of moderate flooding, and that's the current observed, and you can also see the forecasted data for the next 24 hours, and it's forecasted to drop down to normal levels. And again, on the main screen you can see those that same data. Okay, let's go back to our configuration. I'm going to set it back to using our current location as determined by our cell tower triangulation. Come here, and it'll take just a moment to find us. I'll go ahead and force a refresh. And you see the network activity, back to Fort Collins, no flooding. Okay, so then if we go back in here, we're going to look at the option to use forecast data. I'm going to turn that on. And if you remember, when we looked at the hydrograph for Fort Collins, it didn't have any forecast data. And so this should come back in just a moment and tell us, I'm going to see if I can help it along here. It should tell us that it has no data. See the activity, and there's unknown stage. Again, why is that? If you look here, we have no data, so it says unknown stage. If we go back to the map, we'll see a little bit different look with all the gauges as they load. Quite a number of gauges that don't have any forecast data. And that's what that green means, or that gray means, is that there's no forecast data at all for a lot of gauges. So if you're in an area that they do have forecast data, it's kind of interesting. You can go ahead and set it to use forecasted data, and it'll tell you a little bit in advance if there's going to be a flood condition. Alright, so I'm going to go back into configure. I'm going to turn that off. Go back here. I'm going to tell it to refresh, and bingo, we're back to no flooding, so everything's good. Okay, so that's the gist of the application. Again, if you go to the About page, it gives you a little bit more information about the application itself, and a link to our website where you can get a link to our Twitter feed, our YouTube videos, and more information again about the application itself. Okay, well, thank you for joining me, and please check back for future updates. Thank you.